The U.S. economy relies heavily on imports, with the majority of what Americans consume arriving from China and Southeast Asia. Many of these goods may soon face tariffs upon entry. Front-loading is a strategy businesses use to purchase and store products ahead of time, in this case to avoid high tariff costs. Major retailers like Walmart and Columbia Sportswear have adopted this approach. Inside this 1.1 million square foot warehouse in Fort Worth, Texas, millions of dollars worth of goods are being stockpiled in anticipation of potentially broad tariffs that are expected to be imposed on China, Mexico, and Canada. Between 2023 and 2024, Walmart's imports from China surged by 33%, while Columbia Sportswear's imports increased by 50% over the same period, with a staggering 80% jump from March to December. Meanwhile, container imports from China to the U.S. have skyrocketed. 2024 has seen a significant amount of front-loading. Initially, shippers were reacting to the Red Sea disruption, but now, the focus has shifted to Trump's tariffs taking effect. However, not all businesses can rely on front-loading. From an execution standpoint, I'm curious how companies will manage this, how they'll navigate the challenges. Planning for uncertainty is a nightmare for any business manager. President Trump earlier announced that he plans to introduce a 25% tariff on Mexico and Canada starting February 1st, along with a 10% tariff on China. But he later announced a month-long delays on Canadian and Mexican tariffs after both countries sent delegations to negotiate, offering minor increases to existing border security and promises to take more action to restrict fentanyl crossing into the United States. Tariffs are government-imposed taxes on imported goods and services, and if they take effect, not only businesses but consumers will feel the financial impact. Prices will undoubtedly rise on everyday goods, from cars and gasoline to iPhones, laptops, and tablets. Even clothing and groceries like avocados, corn, and tomatoes will become more expensive. To understand the impact of these tariffs on shippers and consumers, in Fort Worth, Texas, a major logistics hub located a few hundred miles from the Mexican border. Paul Brashear, head of global supply chain at ITS Logistics, a leading U.S. shipping company with annual revenues around $1 billion, explains, "This region is at the heart of one of the most significant distribution center networks in the country," Brashear says. Dallas-Fort Worth services approximately 75% of the U.S. within 2 days. Everything moves through here: electronics, infrastructure goods, and food. The warehouse also stores large quantities of Chinese and Mexican goods to avoid potentially steep tariffs. Many ITS clients have already front-loaded their shipments. Since November 2024, companies of all sizes have accelerated imports to beat the Trump tariffs, Brashear adds. Lenovo's imports from China alone jumped 22% between 2023 and 2024. When asked how many of these products actually originate from China, Brashear says over half of them came directly from China. They arrive in bulk via ocean containers and trucks. One of the largest product categories being front-loaded is components used in infrastructure projects. Paul Brashear: "You're currently looking at 500,000 square feet of goods designated for domestic consumption. These components are vital for building roads, bridges, and electrical grids across the United States," Brashear explains. Why front-load infrastructure materials? Paul Brashear: "The main reason is budgeting. Infrastructure budgets are planned 2 to 3 years in advance," Brashear explains. A 20% increase in costs could completely disrupt those budgets. Import Genius data supports these claims. Imports of solar panels, server racks, backup power supplies, and lithium batteries, which power data centers, have surged in the latter half of 2024. Consumer goods such as sweatshirts and smokeless fire pits are also piling up in warehouses. Walmart and Columbia Sportswear have been ramping up imports ahead of the tariffs to minimize cost increases. However, storing inventory is expensive. Medium and small importers are the most affected by these changes, Brashear says. Larger corporations like Walmart have vast distribution networks and the resources to absorb costs, but smaller businesses struggle to do the same. You may be curious as to who are the biggest beneficiary of front-loading? Well, certain logistics firms like ITS Logistics are actually profiting from both transporting and storing these goods. Does that mean these additional costs eventually get passed on to consumers? Yes, all costs in commerce get passed down to the consumer in some form, Brashear confirms. Footwear industry faces unique challenges. Rick Muscat, president of Deer Stags, a family-run shoe company, is one of many business owners concerned about the potential impact. His company sells $50 men's shoes at major retailers like Macy's, Kohl's, and Amazon, importing around 2 million pairs per year, 98% of which come from China. Why small businesses can't front-load? Muscat explains that unlike Walmart, his company does not have the resources to stockpile inventory. Walmart has massive warehouses, trucking fleets, and distribution networks. They sell millions of shoes in our price range, giving them far more leverage than we have. During the pandemic, when shipping rates skyrocketed, Walmart could charter entire cargo ships. They could book entire vessels, while we struggled to secure a single shipping container. Footwear has already been hit with heavy tariffs, some of which date back to the 1930s. For example, a men's leather shoe incurs an 8.5% base duty plus an additional 7.5% tariff, totaling 16%. Unforeseen costs on orders already in transit. One major concern is that thousands of pairs of shoes currently en route to the United States could suddenly be subject to new tariffs. We have 200,000 pairs of shoes already on the water, heading to the United States, Muscat says. If tariffs go into effect before they arrive, we'll face unexpected costs that weren't factored into pricing agreements with major retailers. Muscat provided an invoice from U.S. Customs to illustrate how tariffs are directly billed to importers. When we bring shoes into the U.S., Customs deducts the tariff directly from our account. The cost is immediately absorbed by us. Not China's bank account, and not a Mexican bank account, but our bank account, Muscat clarifies. Mexico and Canada face tariff fallout. The ITS logistics warehouse sits just 400 miles from Laredo, Texas, the largest U.S.-Mexico land port, handling 35% of cross-border trade. Higher tariffs on Mexican goods could disrupt trade flow, particularly in auto manufacturing. Mexico exports 3.5 million vehicles annually, with 76% destined for the United States. The Mexican government has already vowed retaliation if tariffs are imposed. China, Mexico, and European nations could all introduce counter tariffs, disrupting supply chains and increasing costs for American consumers. Tariffs don't just impact businesses, they affect everyone. From manufacturers to the everyday shopper at the store, Brashear warns. President Trump is making major moves to abolish the IRS, laying off over 6,000 employees and proposing the Fair Tax Act of 2025. His plan? Replace income taxes with tariffs on foreign imports. But is this even possible? In this video, we break down how the U.S. tax system works, whether tariffs could realistically replace income tax, and what this means for inflation, national debt, and your financial future. To understand what is happening and how this will impact your financial situation, watch this video as Trump vows to abolish income tax. Please subscribe and stay tuned to understand the big